They are saying that it hasn't been tested for COVID-19, but nothing has thus far. As I go back to, neither has social distancing. This drug has been around for a good 70 years. It was first discovered in 1937. Hydroxychloroquine actually came to use as an anti-malarial drug, and which, by the way, your listeners may or may not know, the CDC was actually formed in the very beginning to be an anti-malarial monitor.
Hey, everybody, it's Alex Newman with the New American, and we are here. We're very honored to have with us Dr. Carladine Graves. She's a board certified physician in family medicine by the American Board of Family Practice. And it's an honor to have her with us. She's been providing information to the White House on coronavirus and COVID-19, and just an incredibly insightful woman who knows more about medicine and these types of things than than almost anybody that I know. And so, Dr. Graves, Carladine, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Hey, it's great to have you with us. And Carla Dean is also very influential in the conservative movement. Pretty much she knows everybody. It's kind of amazing. But Carla Dean, it's an honor to have you with us. So Carla Dean, obviously we need to talk about coronavirus because that's what everybody's talking about, and so we need to do the same. And that's really what's on everybody's mind, especially because the economy is, partially shut down. People don't know when this is going to end. And so I want to start with the obvious question: how significant is the threat of coronavirus? Should we be very scared? Is it overblown? Somewhere in the middle? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think somewhere in the middle. I don't think that we need to be scared to the point that we're afraid to say hello to someone. This social distancing, actually, it's physical distancing. Social distancing irritates me. I don't think that socially we need to distance ourselves from our loved ones and our friends. This physical distancing, there are some studies that are recently coming out that's saying that maybe this is not the best thing that we should be doing, because actually it's slowing down the curve that's certainly where the infection would have been, and at this point. The same number of people are going to probably die. The same number of people are going to probably get it. It's just going to take longer. And so it extends out the isolation that we have been undergoing over this last month, in some places even more. So I think that there's a lot to think about. I have been shocked, Alex, is at the point that Americans have so freely seemed to isolate and give up their freedoms for safety like this. I mean, and is it really safety? What I've been asking is, has social distancing been actually tested? Dr. Fauci has been so enamored by testing for the medication, the hydroxychloroquine, but has he done a double-blind study on distancing? Has it really gained us anything? I think that your question about is it dangerous or not, that's a good question. It depends upon who you are and what your overall health is. We do know, and everyone's read it by now, I'm sure, that anyone that's 60 or over is at a higher risk. But if you have comorbid conditions, like if you have diabetes, if you have heart disease, if like a young man in our church, he's 17 years old, but he just had a renal transplant. Well, he's at risk because he's immunosuppressed. So it's not his age, it's his condition. So it depends. So I will just say that that's why I think that physicians need to be involved with their patients directly. And this is one of the biggest reasons that I do not like the idea that the FDA actually approved the hydroxychloroquine only for hospitals, because I don't think anyone knows you better than your own family physician that you go to.
Yeah, and that brings up a really important point, Carla Dean. In fact, I actually heard about hydroxychloroquine from you weeks before it became a hot topic of national conversation. You had been talking about it and talking about some of the studies that have been done overseas. Um, what are your thoughts? Is this an effective treatment? And did the FDA mess this up by saying that it could only be available at hospitals? Is this something that doctors ought to be prescribing more broadly to patients who come in? Should they be taking it as a preventative measure to protect themselves? What's the story with the hydroxychloroquine? And what do you think about the government's handling of this so far? I know even a couple of the Democrat governors originally they threatened to prosecute people and come after them if they prescribed this because apparently it hadn't been FDA approved yet for coronavirus. What are your thoughts generally on this possible treatment option and the government's response to it?
I think that hydroxychloroquine has not maybe been approved for COVID virus, but tell me what has. And I think that they meaning those that are not advocating for hydroxychloroquine, what they say is they don't say that it doesn't work. Listen to what they really say. They are saying that it hasn't been tested for COVID-19, but nothing has thus far. As I go back to, neither has social distancing. This drug has been around for a good 70 years. It was first discovered in 1937. Hydroxychloroquine actually came to use as an anti-malarial drug, and which, by the way, your listeners may or may not know, the CDC was actually formed in the very beginning to be an anti-malarial monitor, and it grew out of anti-malarial, and it's an anti-malarial drug, and it's been used for years. It was approved by the FDA in 1955, but it was approved as an anti-malarial drug, and it's been used for many, many other areas in medicine, such as rheumatoid arthritis, lupus. It's been used in dermatological conditions. There are ongoing studies now that it has been used and is being used in actually breast cancer treatment. The Spanish that I have talked with, the Spanish physicians there, have found that it is a mild anticoagulant for blood clots. In fact, sometimes if they are low on their supply of anticoagulation, they will use hydroxychloroquine. The FDA's purpose in America is not saying that the drug is or the medication is necessarily approved for a certain or particular disease or illness. The FDA, they are to actually say if the drug is safe to use. They are not supposed to be telling us how to use it. That's supposed to be up to the physicians. And 1 in 5 prescriptions are actually written off label. So this is nothing that is new. It's just that it has been politicized. Now let me go back a little bit. Weeks ago, myself and a couple of other physicians, we actually wrote a letter to President Trump. It was hand delivered to him. Now we know that he received that, and in the letter we explained hydroxychloroquine and the benefit of using this in COVID-19, or also known as SARS-CoV-2 or COVID. And so the very next day, that is when Trump, at his press conference, first mentioned that hydroxychloroquine could be a game changer. But if you remember what happened after that, he was criticized highly across the nation by the media. And also, if you remember correctly, Dr. Fauci came up to the mic and said, whoa, 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 this hasn't been tested. We don't know that this is going to be a game changer. He actually discredited what President Trump had just said, and he continues to do so at almost every turn. Now, why would Dr. Fauci, who has been at the NIH for well over 30 years, why would he discount hydroxychloroquine when back in the 80s, he actually praised hydroxychloroquine? Because the hydroxychloroquine was what he was using actually in his laboratory to study the HIV virus. And he sang the praises of hydroxychloroquine. So what has happened since that time? Well, we know that Dr. Fauci has patents. What he did was he actually took taxpayers' money at the NIH and he created medications for the HIV and with the help of others. But he took the patents. And within the last 4 years, he's also had patents that pertain to the HIV. And so if there's a vaccine, and of course he's on Bill Gates' board for vaccinations.
Wow.
Yes, he serves on Bill Gates' board. And so with these patents that he has secured for himself with taxpayer money, then he actually benefits from that in royalties from his patents. And within the last 4 years or so, I'm not sure about the 4 years, but it's about around 4 years, that he has actually claimed 4 other patents on glycosination 120. And that has to do with the virus. And it also has to do with the HIV virus. So he has nothing to benefit if hydroxychloroquine is approved, because hydroxychloroquine is tolerated very well by the majority of the population. Yes, we have some that really we shouldn't give hydroxychloroquine. If you have a genetic blockage known as a prolonged QT interval, we wouldn't give it to that individual because it can actually make it worse and cause the heart block to be completely blocked and would require, of course, a pacemaker, or could even lead to death. But those are very, very few. There are some, especially in the Black population, that have an enzyme deficiency. But there again, those are very rare circumstances. Alex, if you went to your family physician today and you said, I'm going to Africa in about 3 or 4 weeks, in about a month, what would you give me as an anti-malarial? They would, without hesitancy, they would write the hydroxychloroquine for you, because that's what we use. Our military troops, when they are shipped overseas, they are given hydroxychloroquine. It is very rare that this medication would cause any actual harm to the majority of the populace of the entire world, let alone this country.
So it sounds like it's a very safe medication, and it sounds like there's a very serious potential conflict of interest here with Dr. Fauci. Why do you think, I know there's a Fire Fauci movement now. We've interviewed a lot of experts who in medicine and science and things, and they've actually suggested that Fauci is just doing terrible things and that he ought to be fired. Why do you think the president is keeping him around when there's all these concerns and when he seems to be undercutting the president's efforts? And what reason could he have to keep him there?
The only reason that I don't know, but the only reason that I can think is that Dr. Fauci has been validated by both sides of the political aisle. He certainly was with Reagan. He served under the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, also with the Obama administration. And he has been validated by both sides of the aisle. And I always say, well, I guess it's all about the pictures. It gives an appearance of actually the two sides working together. And if he were to actually dismiss Dr. Fauci, I think that there would be a great deal of repercussion from the media. Because if you notice, Dr. Fauci was not present with President Trump on an occasion, and the media questioned what's going on. Why isn't he there with you? And I think that a lot of it, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of it is political reasons.
Hmm. Yeah, it does seem like it, and you can bet that the media would have a meltdown if Trump fired Fauci. But that may be what's needed. And beyond the virus and the medicine and the different treatments and maybe conflicts of interest. What do you think about the government's response so far? I know you had some negative things to say about the kind of the untested so-called social distancing. I call it anti-social distancing, and beyond that, the shutting down of huge sectors of our economy, the destruction of so many small businesses. We're at 22 million people have filed for unemployment since the start. It's probably significantly higher than that now. And it seems to be mostly Trump supporters who are hurting, right? It's mom and pop businesses, blue collar workers, whereas all the Wall Street guys and government people and Democrats seem to be doing okay, and all the big corporations. Do you think it was wise to shut down the economy like this, and more broadly speaking, too, on the civil liberties side? They're telling our churches that they can't meet, and they're now trying to restrict protest. Are you concerned about the loss of civil liberties and economic freedom during this crisis and as a response to the coronavirus?
I'm very concerned. I think that it's all unnecessary. I think that there's been more hype in the media than has been necessary at all, especially if we had been allowed, we, meaning physicians, had been allowed to use the hydroxychloroquine early on. We have to go back just a little bit, and if you don't mind, I'm going to give just a little bit of history of
Please
what
do,
has
yeah.
happened. Back in November of 2019, it has been told that definitely the CDC, by our intelligence, was told that this virus, this COVID-19, was coming, and that was in November. Now, if you remember correctly, and we all as human beings, and I include myself, we have short memories. And therefore, if you remember right, everyone was busy at that time impeaching a president, President
Hmm.
Trump. They were too busy actually focusing on impeachment to worry about a virus. Well, when the virus finally they knew it was going to come about, the Germans actually came to the CDC and they asked, hey, we have a way of testing for this. We've given it to South Korea, we've given it to some others, and if you notice, South Korea has done very well. And the CDC said, no, we'll just create our own testing. Well, okay, they did. And it took, obviously, when you start from scratch, it takes time. And so that put us behind in testing. Then when the test went out, and that's called the PCR testing, a polymerized chain reaction. And all it does is that it actually measures some of the little short chains of RNA and DNA. And they found out when they shipped out these, and they finally got them researched and produced, they sent them to Washington State, and they sent them also to California. Well, physicians finally noticed that they felt that they were getting erroneous results. And indeed they were. So the CDC had to recall all of those PCR testings that they were using. The PCR test is not something that everyone should run out and get. In fact, I wouldn't get one myself. Because if you have any of the virus in your full upper nasal pharyngeal, the upper airway, and you take that probe and you put it down your nose and it goes clear to the back of your throat, all you're doing is pushing that virus down further. And these lineups that they're doing, I think, is ridiculous. Because here you have a person doing maybe one car after another. And so how do you know that you're not spreading the virus from one car to another? It's not safe. And so we also know that a PCR is much like an EKG or an ECG, if you want to use a technical term, the electrocardiogram. Alex, I could have an electrocardiogram done right now, and it would only give me a window of time that my heart was beating and what it was doing at that time. But I might walk out my front door and go into atrial fibrillation, which is a possibility of throwing a blood clot and I could die. So a PCR is only giving us a window of opportunity, because after 10 days, the upper nasopharyngeal area clears the COVID-19 virus. But we have in our bodies what are called angiotensin converting enzymes. And those enzymes are actually what help the COVID-19 virus adhere to the cellular wall. I call it the Elmer's glue. When the virus is taken in, then that it actually activates this angiotensin converting enzyme. It actually causes a bonding of that virus to the host cell. We all know that viruses, they can't live on their own. They're parasites. I hate to say this, but I'm going to. Somewhat like politicians. I'm sorry, it just had to come out. It didn't stay in there very well.
That's true, though.
And so they can't live on their own. They have to live off of someone else. And so the virus is actually bonded to this angiotensin converting enzyme, and it gets through the cell wall through that way. And the process that it does that is called endocytosis. And I really don't want to go into a big viral study here. But what we know and what we have seen of this is that we call it ACE2, angiotensin converting enzyme 2. And they're throughout our body, but they're mostly concentrated in the lungs and in the intestines and in the kidneys, particularly. So what happens is that the virus leaves after 10 days, the upper nasopharyngeal area, and it migrates down into the lung. So if you do a PCR test at day 11 to see if the virus is there, well, it may be negative, but that doesn't mean that you don't have the virus. That doesn't mean that it's not in your intestines, or it's in your kidneys, or down in your lungs.
Interesting. Yeah, my brother actually just got one of those tests done, and he's waiting on his results. That'll be interesting. I'll send him this video. Wow, so it's a lot to digest, Dr. Graves, and it's clearly there's some problems going on. But what would you recommend if you were in charge? What would be the correct response for government and for the healthcare system to take with this coronavirus? What would you say would be some really good and effective solutions to try to take care of the American people while also maintaining our liberties and our constitutional system of government? What would be a better way forward out of this mess that we're in?
I think a better forward way is to do what we call the antibody testing, which is the IgM and the IgG. IgM is, we can tell within about 5 to 6 days if you've even been exposed to the coronavirus by doing the IgM and the IgG testing. However, here again, physicians' hands have been tied. Because if you remember correctly, hydroxychloroquine came out for hospitals only, hospital use. Then, when we discovered that we could actually do antibody testing that was much more effective, because if I drew an antibody level on you right now, Alex, and you had IgM, which is the early antibody, then I would know that Alex Newman needed some hydroxychloroquine, because I would not want that virus take the chance on it actually multiplying and causing more severe illness. So I would put you on it, but I would put you on a very low dose. Now, if you have rheumatoid arthritis or if you have lupus, then the hydroxychloroquine is given maybe 400 milligrams 2 times a day. However, what we are giving and what we are saying, if you didn't have any symptoms and you tested positive for IgM, then we would give you hydroxychloroquine, probably 1 a day for 5 days. But what some of these studies that the government is doing is really not fair to the hydroxychloroquine. Why? Because they are not adding to that a very, very important component to that, and that's zinc. Zinc is very difficult to get into the cell wall normally. However, the hydroxychloroquine seems to make the cellular wall more permeable to the zinc. Well, what does the zinc do? It gets into the cell and it actually fools the virus and says, let me help you replicate while you're in the endosomes, which are the little vesicles that feed our cells. And what they do is they actually shut off the replication. The zinc actually shuts off the replication of the COVID virus. So it needs to work synergistically. They need to be working together. The hydroxychloroquine, or if you want to, chloroquine, and the zinc need to be given actually at the same time. After we would give you, if you had IgM and no symptoms whatsoever, then why do we want to give you the hydroxychloroquine? Because we don't want you shedding it to your wife and to others around you. And if you go out into the community, we don't want to have you shedding the virus more to the community, even if you go to the grocery store. Mm-hmm. So this will cut down the viral shedding. But what's really good about it is that it allows your own immune system to actually finally develop what we call IgG, immunoglobulin G. And when you get that actually established in your body, then you probably are not going to shed, and you would be more safe to go back to your jobs. If we went and we were testing people for IgG, and then we would know that they had immunity, then they could go right back into the workforce with little, if any, danger or risk to coworkers or those that they came in contact with. So you see, the government now stepped in, and they have actually taken a lot of the kits away from physicians. So not only do physicians now not have the hydroxychloroquine to give to the patients, but now they are actually taking away the testing kits that we could use in our offices. It would take maybe 1 to 2 minutes to get a test back. But instead, I was turned down over the weekend. I wrote a paper, and someone saw the paper who is actually working with HHS and FDA and CDC. And they asked me to actually write another paper on it, so I did, explaining how we need, as physicians out in the field on the front lines, to have the antibody testing available to us instead of using the large Abbott machine that they are now placing in university settings and large hospitals, to have all the testing done through those larger centers. But we could also have it very reliably in the physician's offices, and they would more appropriately turn people back out into their communities and to their places of work. Well, the HHS turned down my paper that was delivered to them. And they said, no, because we don't trust physicians to turn in the data.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So why do
And
you think the government is getting in the way like this? I mean, it sounds like a big part of the problem is the government handcuffing doctors and physicians and medical professionals and not allowing them to do what needs to be done. Why do you think they're doing that? Why would they do that?
well, without sounding like a conspiracy theorist here,
Uh-oh.
everybody goes, oh boy, they roll their eyes. Oh, that Dr. Graves, she's really way out there. She's weird. She believes that actually the government's after us. Like I've always said, if they knock at your door and they say that they're there to help you, just hand them your lawyer's card.
Right.
That's what you do.
Amen.
You just say, "Why, thank you. I hope that my lawyer can help you." Uh, so I have no idea because I'm working with countries around the world, around the globe. Um, Working with the Secretary of India has communicated with me and has been very kind in sending me their protocol. Remember, they have 1.2 billion individuals or more in their country. And to have a pandemic strike across that country, and as we know, there are many, many poor individuals in India who have no health care whatsoever. And so they cannot afford to let a pandemic like this hit their streets where there are well, it kind of looks like the streets of San Francisco and some of the places that are sanctuary cities, uh,
Yeah.
most of India. And so what they did was they immediately they gave all of their first responders hydroxychloroquine. And they've adopted a policy where they are actually giving the hydroxychloroquine not only to a family member who might come down with it, but they give it to the entire family. Everybody gets hydroxychloroquine, even if one member has shown up with the COVID-19, because they do not want this to be spread out among their community. And they are using it on a very wide basis. And so this is what we have been advocating for from, well, like you said, even before it hit. As far as being controversial, we were actually advocating because what that hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine does, what we have found is it puts a coating over the cell so that that enzyme is not actually able to bind that virus to the human cell. And we also think that it also decreases the inflammatory cytokinins. You may have heard of cytokinin storm that people actually go into, and that's usually when they are unfortunately put on ventilators.
Hmm.
And that's another whole story that I could tell you about that we probably should not be doing, is using a lot of ventilators.
That's what I've been
These,
hearing too. Yeah.
oh, it's causing scarring in the lungs. We do not, a ventilator is used when a patient cannot breathe on their own. The problem is that patients who have this COVID-19, then they become so ill, it's not because their musculature is not performing correctly with the lungs. It is because they actually cannot diffuse the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. And it's a more of a diffusion problem than it is actually a musculature problem. And so we're finding out that when these vents are particularly set at high pressures, what we're probably doing is causing a great deal of scar tissue in the lungs that person is going to have for the rest of their life. Now, let me add something just very quickly. One thing that we are looking at now, we don't have enough data on it, and I understand that, but we have noticed that those individuals who have normal vitamin D levels do not go on ventilators. And what your listeners could really do is actually go to your physician. Say, I want a vitamin D level. I want to know what my vitamin D level is. And we would like to have it at about 55 to 70 nanograms per mil level. That would be a good level to have to build up your immunity. We have also found that zinc is actually good to have on board. What would you need? Maybe 25 milligrams a day if you're not ill. However, if you're ill with the COVID, we give it in higher dosage. And remember what I had said, we give the hydroxychloroquine in low doses, like 200 milligrams one a day, and then maybe one a week thereafter until the pandemic is over, if you have the IgM and you're asymptomatic. And then we've taken those protocols and we have extended them out to a level of, for outpatient, to hospitalization. But we need to have also vitamin C. Vitamin C is a great anti-inflammatory vitamin. And we would like to see people on at least 2,000 milligrams a day of vitamin C, probably between 2 and 5,000 of vitamin D. And like I said, the zinc, 25 milligrams actually per day, at least until this pandemic is over. That's one thing that they can do to build up their immune system.
You must have been reading my mind, Carla Dean, because I was going to ask you. You took both my questions right out of my mouth. What can the average American do to kind of protect themselves? And are vitamins, a useful tool in this struggle? So, in the few minutes that we have left, Carla Dean, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think is important to talk about? And beyond just protecting their own health, in terms of protecting liberty, do you have any ideas, any recommendations for what the American people could be doing to try to get some more sanity back into the policymaking process, to try to get some of these more coercive measures reversed, if you think they ought to be reversed? My wife is from Sweden. I spent most of the last decade living in Sweden, and they have some stuff going on, but it seems they haven't shut down the restaurants or the bars or the schools or anything. And they seem to be doing pretty okay. Could we have something like that in America and be okay? And if so, what might people do to try to bring some sanity back into this whole process?
I think their voices need to be heard.
Mhm.
I think that they need to speak up. I'm very disappointed that legislators seem to have selective hearing. Uh, if you are a lobbyist and you offer a lot of money for reelection, they seem to hear you very well.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Now, if you are a constituent and you have an hourly wage, but you have a concern that you want your representative or your senator to listen to, then it seems that you get a form letter back or a form type of reply back that one of the staffers got stuck with or an intern got stuck with in returning your message, if you even get that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that individuals in America, until we speak up, now remember what our forefathers said, it was a government for the people. But then what did they follow that with? It was by the people. And people want to leave that out because with that comes responsibility. And so they need to have their voices heard and actually demand release the hydroxychloroquine to the physicians as you do in other conditions, such as an anti-malarial or malarial treatment, such as a lupus or a rheumatoid. It reminds me of Moses, let my people go. Let our medicine go. Let our medicine go. And then I think that also they, meaning physicians, should be allowed to do the testing at a local level very quickly, and they would know more scientifically how to treat the patients. I think that that's one thing I would like to insist upon, and insist if you have a loved one in the hospital, and I have done this time and time again now by internet, I have those family members insist that that the person who is maybe on a ventilator and can't speak for themselves be placed on zinc, vitamin C, and the vitamin D in high dosages that can usually only be given in the hospital intravenously. But please advocate for your loved one.
Excellent. All right. Well, Dr. Graves, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for being so well informed on this and sharing your insight and the information with us. So we really appreciate it. Please keep up the good work, and thank you once again to the viewers out there. Thank you for watching. Please make sure you share this video. As you know, YouTube and Facebook don't like us much, and they don't want alternative information, other narratives, other voices to be getting out there. So we depend on you to get this information out. Share it by email and on social media. Subscribe, like, and do all those other good things that that only you know how to do and that only you can do. And thanks again for watching, everybody, and God bless.